Joining us to discuss more about the president's budget priorities and where the U.S. goes from here, we're joined by Dean Baker. He is the co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research, as well as Maricruz Magowan. She is the vice president of the National Economist Club. Thank you both for coming in. A lot of times this is just nothing but just a piece of paper, a proposal that's thrown out there, and it doesn't really go anywhere. But do you see, and I'll start with you, Dean, do you see anything here where, and I'm going to say it with a smile, there will be deep bipartisan support for?
Well, there'll be one thing there'll be deep bipartisan opposition to, at least around much of the country, and this was President Obama made a big point of having cuts to Social Security. He's changing the annual cost of living adjustment. And this is something that, when you poll the public on, across the spectrum, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, self-identified Tea Party conservatives are all opposed to that. Now, in Washington, everyone seems to like that. So that might get some bipartisan support in Congress. From the public at large, the opposite.
How about you, Maricruz? You see anything here? Is it just
I don't
going to fall flat?
Yes, I think it's not going to pass. A lot of Democrats already are unhappy about that. And of course, the Republicans, it is not saying anything new. He is adding again from 2014 to 2023, 8.5 trillion to the debt, as if we don't have enough net debt already. And in cuts, one thing that many things call my attention, but one of the things that called my attention is that he's reducing the payments for immunizations and cancer screening. So preventive health care, which is the best way to take care of health care. Just because he follows and says, this is justified because 30 more million people are going to be part because of Obamacare of the health care.
Well, it seems that there are these two camps, and we see this over in Europe too. You can grow your way out of a problem or austerity. And it seems like we have these two camps here in Washington, D.C. So where do we go from here? And I'll go to you again, Dean.
Well, I think we do have evidence on this. I mean, we could see what happens when you have austerity. We have the path of England. We joke about how they were kind enough to throw their country into recession to show us austerity does not work. I mean, we have large deficits because the economy collapsed. That's easy to show. We didn't go on a spending spree in 2008, 2009. We didn't suddenly have an orgy of tax cuts. The economy collapsed. The deficit's supporting the economy. So the question is, do you want less growth or more growth? We might love the private sector to death, but that's not the way businesses make investment. They don't do it because we want them to. So when you're talking about how can you have the economy grow, I don't really see a credible alternative. So, we could get hysterical about the debt, but in fact, the interest burden of the debt is at a post-war low. So I am very hard-pressed to see why we should worry about the debt today, and I'd say for the moment, at least, the financial markets very much agree with me.
Maricruz, I'll give you some chance to talk about that as well.
Well, we should worry about the debt. Why? Because evidence shows that countries that have more than 90% of their GDP in debt, I think not total debt, not only public, they don't have economic growth, and we need economic growth. The big difference in the way that the Democrats and Republicans see this, as Democrats see it as a fixed pie. The size doesn't grow. So they have to go into deficits or they have to go into austerity. But Republicans see as this pie that grows, and that's economic growth. And yes, we have to balance it out, but we have to do whatever it takes to promote economic growth so everybody can continue prospering.
Is there anything that can be done to help fuel growth, in a sense? So he's talking about a 3% growth rate. Is there anything that can be done to juice it a little bit
Sure,
higher?
Larger deficits. I mean, there's a very good track record on that. You have large deficits. We did this in World War II, and there's not a magic you call it war, and somehow spending because you call it a war has more impact on growth. We had very strong growth during those years because we were spending lots of money, and that's really what you need to get out of this sort of slump.
Maricruz, he's saying the deficit's a good thing.
It's not a good thing. We're just printing money, and we are holding the interest rates artificially low. The tipping point here is when the interest rates go up. That's when we are going to see if your theory is right or my theory is right. And I think everybody's going to suffer when the interest rate go to the level they should be, because right now they are artificially low. It's like a bubble that we are having there.
Paul Ryan came out with his proposal a while back. It, according to him, will balance the budget by 2023. Is that realistic? And should that be a target to balance the budget, and when?
Well, balancing budgets, this is game playing. If you want me to balance the budget, I could do some accounting tricks and we'll have a balanced budget tomorrow. It'd be silly, but if that's what's big for you. Now, Paul Ryan's proposing eliminating large chunks of the federal government. And if you look back at his early proposals, literally he called for eliminating most of the federal government. I think you'd find almost no Republicans that would seriously support that. I mean, they might support his words on paper, but in terms of actually basically getting rid of the Medicaid program that pays for most seniors' home health care, their nursing homes, other things that are in the budget, there's no way on earth people would support that.
Maricruz, I mean, I can't remember a time when they weren't talking about we got to balance the budget. It's been the talk in Washington for forever. Is it really that important?
It is extremely important. It's like in your house. Wouldn't you be worried if your debt would be larger than your annual income?
I guess. Of course, but I'm not a government. I mean, I'm not allowed to print money. That's the difference. I mean, isn't it? I mean, that's the huge difference, really.
Yeah.
My mortgage is
But
larger
look,
than my income.
if you, in your house, you may have a rich uncle. We are talking about Uncle Sam here. But this time, the rich uncle, Uncle Sam, is broke. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? Where's the U.S. going to go asking for help if we get to the point where we cannot sustain ourselves anymore?
What is the sequester going to do to the economy as it continues to muddle along? And I'll throw that in your direction.
Well, it's a drag on growth. We had growth rate of less than 2% in the second half of 2012, and we ended the payroll tax cut. That slowed growth by roughly half percentage point, according to the Congressional Budget Office. And the sequester will lower growth by, again, roughly another half percentage point. Now, there's some positive factors. Housing's picking up. There's some other things you could point to. But I think we'll be lucky to have even a 2% rate of growth through the year 2013, which is barely enough to keep even with the rate of growth of the labor force, meaning we might see the unemployment rate actually rise.
Maricruz, you get the final word on
Well,
this.
the sequestration is not really cuts. It's cuts in what we were thinking that we were going to spend. The real cuts is only 1.2%, believe it or not.
Well, thank you both for coming in. Certainly appreciate your perspectives on things.
Thanks
You're
for that.
welcome.